Welcome to another evening of All Politics Are Local, America's number one hip hop radio talk show. We are here struggling through COVID season, but it's also something else. It's election season and election year, right? Like, so we think that the races in Newark are heating up, and we have a big program today. We have a lot of different people on board, but we want to jump right in right away with our first interview, where we have and correct me, right? Like, I've known you for years, and I'm gonna say the name, I'm gonna get it right, but if I get it wrong, please correct us. Chigozie Onyema, and did I get it right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
All right, well, it's not pretty much. I'm gonna tell you what I tell my students. Names are important, and so that's pretty much is not good enough. So tell us exactly how to say it, and let's get started.
Yeah, Chigozie. It's really Chigozie. The IE is like an EA.
Okay, cool.
Chigozie, yeah.
Chigozie. All right, cool. So so welcome to All Politics Are Local. I've seen you and known you for years. We actually in a weird way share like people. One of my first debaters, one of the first people I ever coached, turned out to be your teacher. So someone who was my student turned out to be your teacher a long time ago. So one of my best students, actually. So welcome and welcome to the show. You are running for West Ward councilman in a hotly contested race. Talk to us. Why should you be West Ward council person?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me, brother. And thank you, Baba Zayid, as well. It's good to be with you. But I want to sort of circle back to like the full circle moment that we have with the teacher that we have in common. So Melissa Cooper, who was, am I still here?
Yes, you are.
Name it. Yeah, say his name. Yeah.
Melissa Cooper, who was your student and who you also coached in debate, was my high school teacher at Columbia High School. And my family's from Newark initially, and we lived in the Hill Manor Apartments, which was on then High Street and eventually became Martin Luther King Boulevard. But we moved to Maplewood when I was in elementary school. So I left St. Rocco's and I started to attend Maplewood and South Orange Public Schools. And one of the things that happens when you get to sixth grade is that they begin to track students in sixth grade, which is to say that they organize students based on their abilities. So you get a letter in the mail. It either says top, upper middle, lower middle, or standard. I was fortunate enough to receive letters that said top, but most of my friends, all of whom, or at least the overwhelming majority of whom are Black, received letters that says something like lower middle, standard, and occasionally upper middle.
It's so tracking.
Absolutely, tracking system. That's right.
It's a soft hand of segregation in public schools that is rampant in quote liberal districts. Keep talking, son. Keep talking.
Sir. Yeah. And I think so for me, when I think about, this race, but what really politicizes me is that experience, right? So by the time I get to high school, I meet Melissa Cooper, who's my high school teacher. She teaches a sociology elective and she also teaches history courses. But I have her for sociology. And that's really the first time that I start to get language that helps me understand the world around me, right? So I get language like race, language like class, and eventually language like imperialism. But that was a little bit further on down the line. But she gives me this language. And so I began to ask questions about, okay, what can we do to transform this tracking system and give, Black and brown students the kind of opportunities that they deserve in public schools? And so she says that, these decisions are made at the school board level, right? And the school board is elected. And so I later learned that all you needed was 10 petitions to get on the ballot. So me and a friend of mine, we decide that, we're going to run for office and we're going to abolish tracking. So we get our petition signed. I find some friends, get my 10 petitions signed, and I decide to run for office. And we're not successful. I think there's some things that I learned today that I wish I could have implemented back in 2005. But what I did learn is that when you fight, you win, even if it doesn't happen right away. And what I mean by that is, although we weren't able to win the election and abolish tracking, what the public schools did was they said, okay, for science and social studies, we'll begin tracking them in high school and not in middle school anymore. For math and language arts, we won't track in sixth grade, we'll begin tracking in seventh grade. The superintendent, who we felt was insensitive to our issues, he agreed to retire at the end of his term. The principal of the high school, who we felt was racist, we were able to get her tenure denied, because I think you can get tenure as a principal.
Right.
So for me, these were really formative experiences and what sort of brought me to electoral politics, or even just politics more broadly and organizing work more broadly. So fast forward now, 2021, I'm a homeowner in the West Ward. And I think that we're at a critical moment in our history. I think that the West Ward has experienced a void of leadership for the last few years, at least. And I think that it's a void of leadership at a time where Newark, like so many other urban areas, is really a tale of two cities. I think if you think about downtown, it's bursting at the seams with development. NJ Pack just built some new towers. Of course, you have the Prudential towers that were built some years ago. M&N, the Mars company, has put one of their headquarters inside the city of Newark. And Broadridge, I think, is at the Gateway building. But at the same time you have that, you also have, vacant and hollowed out blocks in the Fairmont community. We had 2 murders in the past 2 days, one on South 6th Street, one on Alexander. And so I think that one of the things that we need the most is leadership, some leadership with vision and creativity to begin to bridge that gap. And I don't think it's any one person that does it, but I think better leadership moves us in the right direction. And so that's why I decided to put my hat in the arena.
Okay, great. So you already talked about a lot of your personal experience, but one of the things that I've asked, and we'll ask the other candidates, is what is there uniquely about your background that make you a better candidate than the other candidates who are running?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think, for me, I think what's probably unique about me in the field is my sort of professional and organizing background. I'm an attorney by training. So I spent some time at different nonprofit advocacy groups. When I got out of law school, I didn't decide to work at a big law firm. I decided to work at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. And at that time, criminal justice was sort of one of the hot topics. Michelle Alexander had just wrote The New Jim Crow. And we had a generation of activists that began to ask questions about how the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow manifested itself through the criminal justice system. And so when I was a young staff attorney, one of the things that we decided to do was to put together an ordinance, or really some state legislation eventually, called Ban a Box, which was to remove a box on an employment application that asked folks before the interview process whether they have criminal convictions. And our hope with removing that box is that if we delay it to later on in the process, more people might have an opportunity to be screened in a favorable way. And by the time you find out about a person's past criminal history, you might be more likely to welcome them in as an employee. So, that sort of experience dealing with policy, dealing with legislation, dealing with community members, pushing ordinances, not only in the city of Newark, but in Jersey City and Patterson. I think we even got one done in Trenton before we eventually passed statewide legislation. I think things like that set me apart, but also the community organizing work that we've done. After spending some time as a staff attorney, I felt like while the policy work was meaningful and important, I also wanted to be involved on a ground level. So I joined organizations like the People's Organization for Progress, and I also founded an organization called the Maroon Project. And the Maroon Project, we began really on the heels of the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, and we started to do something called Books and Breakfast. And Books and Breakfast was in the tradition of the Black Panther Party, in the sense that we were providing free breakfast to young people, and we saw ourselves in that tradition. But what we did was we said, we want to feed people's minds and feed their bodies. And we also wanted to introduce them to literature. We feel like, one of the best ways to learn, to explore, because we can't meet everybody or travel to every place, is through reading. And we also thought that it was critical that folks saw themselves in the books, right? So it's like a picture. If we all take a picture together, we're going to look at the picture. First thing we're going to look at is ourselves and make sure that we look okay. And I think if folks see themselves in the literature, they're more likely to pick those books up and explore that. So we went ahead and got folks books. We were doing it at the Source of Knowledge bookstore, got them books with Black and brown characters, and books that were very positive. And we also fed them and created programming around some of that stuff. And eventually we evolved into doing some different kinds of work. So when George Floyd gets murdered, we host a rally in Military Park. We also begin to ask questions about what it means to defund the police. And I also want to note that the rally that we hosted, for me, is really speaks to the kind of leadership that we want to bring to the West Ward. So it wasn't just a rally where we found the most charismatic people and said, everybody's going to speak, the most charismatic speakers speak, and then everybody goes home. Instead, what we said was we're going to organize the rally into pods. So we certainly framed the conversation with some charismatic speakers, but we then decided to organize people into 3 pods. One was COVID-19, one was anti-gentrification, and one was defunding the police. And the idea was that we wanted to facilitate conversations around these issues, what they mean in the city of Newark. And then we also wanted to capture some of that in writing. So we might have a prompt question, for example, on a big poster board. So how did COVID impact you? And I know for me, one of the things that I wrote was that I lost my father through COVID. And then I think some other folks talked about their experiences, whether it was loneliness, whether it was like fears around evictions, which, we might actually have to deal with very soon. Folks kind of spoke about all those different things. And I think for me, it means when I say that it's really signals the kind of leadership we want to bring. It's this notion that any sort of lasting change or any sort of meaningful engagement has to include people and has to come from the ground up. It's not something that can be top down. So we wanted our rallies to reflect that, and we're going to make sure that our leadership reflects that. So I think the kind of work that we've done in this community absolutely sets us apart.
All right. So the question also that we ask people is the candidates, what are the specific policies that you would actually fight for, and why are those policies specifically needed in the West Ward?
Yeah. So one of the things that I brought up, been 2 murders in the past 2 days in the city. And I think that public safety is a real challenge in the city. I think that, all around the country, folks have been trying to negotiate that issue. I don't think you can point to a mayor or a city council person and blame them for the public safety challenges. But I think that one of the things that we've learned is that we can't arrest our way out of the problem. And I think so often when we think about public safety, the first thing that we think about is police. But I think that while that's partly true, that's entirely too narrow of a way to think about public safety. And I think what public safety really means is that people have the resources that they need to address the critical social problems that they face on a day-to-day basis, right? So public safety has to mean improving the material conditions of the communities that you're in. And I think that an easy example might be housing. So while somebody might say housing is just an economic development thing that really, shapes the built environment of an area, I'll say, that's partly true, but housing is also a public safety thing. We build affordable housing, we bring people off the streets. If we build affordable housing, perhaps a parent can spend less time at work and more time with their families at home and dealing with the young children. And I also think that, we want to bring social programs to bear in order to deal with some of these public safety challenges as well, whether they be recreation, whether we expand youth employment to do so. So I think the main thing that we want to do is to figure out how we can invest in social programming to deal with the public safety challenges. And we want to put the public back in public safety. What I mean by that is, for example, in New York, they do public budgeting. I don't think in New Jersey there's any public budgeting, but we'd like to bring public budgeting to the state of New Jersey and to the city of Newark, and we can begin with piloting programs in the West Ward.
What is public budgeting? We're running short on time, but what is public budgeting?
Public budgeting basically means that instead of city council members, your representatives deciding on a budget, the people directly decide on the budget themselves. So you might convene a meeting and the community gets to decide what kinds of things they want to fund. And I'm saying that is something that we can do as we think about the public safety budget in the city of Newark. I think that the people on these blocks and in these communities have the best understanding of the challenges that they face. And I think we should pilot certain programs where folks get to publicly budget how they want those public safety dollars spent in their communities.
And there's one final question that we ask everyone who is on our show. And because this is All Politics Local, America's number one.
Before you ask him that question, Jonathan, I just want to just put a pin on something. One, I want to extend my condolences to Chigozie for the loss of your father due to COVID. COVID, ripped the heart out of a lot of us, not just barely survived it myself. I appreciate the roundedness of what you're talking about, and there are some things that I'd like to talk to you about offhand around some of the defund notions that need some expansion. Yeah. Right. So I just wanted to put a pin in that and acknowledge your loss because you were rolling and we didn't get a chance to do that. Go ahead, Jonathan. Ask a question.
Absolutely, and we're definitely going to have you back on the show as well because that's important. I think I lost my father last year, so I mean definitely condolences as well. What we ask on our show all the time of all of our guests is, who is your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group? And you can give us a closing statement with that to wrap up quickly in about 1 minute.
Of like all time, not right now.
Could be either. Whatever it could. If you're feeling it, if it's all time, you got the option to ask.
For me, it's Jay-Z all time. I mean, I'm a huge Jay-Z fan, so I'd say him all time. Right now, I'd say someone like perhaps like a J. Cole's probably my favorite right now. But yeah, that's my favorite. But I mean, I like so many different artists, man. I think that hip hop has been such a huge influence over my life and just how I negotiate problems. I negotiate problems through songs, and it kind of brings me up when I'm down. So, but I'd say Jay-Z overall, man. I think he's my favorite lyricist, even if you maybe Black Thought might be better, right? But Jay-Z's my favorite lyricist. He's the most clever. So I'll put Jay.
All right, thank you so much. We do this and we interview candidates as part of our overall mission of having civic discourse. We think politics, we think these elections are very serious. We want people to have the best iteration of their argument, the best way to talk about like why you should vote for you. Why is the election process important? So that is a theme of our show. And we thank you for being a part of that. And definitely we want to have you back. One of the most hotly contested races is the West Ward race in Newark this year. It is in May. And we hope to have the candidates back multiple times between now and then to talk about issues and go even deeper. So thank you so much. We very much appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, brother. I look forward to coming back. Baba Zayid, thank you, brother.
Right. Good to see you, son.
Good to see you too. Y'all take care.
All right, you too.